I don't know if I'm the same way as you with my glasses, but when you have pictures of yourself not wearing glasses, I do not recognize you.
It's so weird.
So you posted, to give context, you posted some pictures of a wedding that you were at this weekend on Instagram.
Yes.
And I pulled my phone out at one point this weekend, and I saw those pictures, and I was like, who the hell is this? Like, who is this person that I'm following? Like, I have never seen this person in my life. And I look Callie Pro, I was like, what?
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. Like, you look great, but it was just like, I was like, who is this person?
Yeah, I get that a lot because I can't see. I don't have contacts. So I went to this wedding like completely flying blind. People were blobs, but it was black tie, so I didn't wear my glasses. It was fun. And so many people have been like, what? Who are you?
It's wild. Like, I've never had that happen to me with anybody else I know that wears glasses.
Yeah. It also doesn't help that I had my hair professionally done and my makeup professionally done. The first ones I posted, it was like right when my hair was at its poofiest, and I just felt the spirit of Casey Musgraves running through me, and that was like my inspiration for the whole look was Casey Musgraves.
Not a bad spirit to have. How was the wedding?
I didn't have too many people who tried to pat my pregnant belly, which was nice. I feel like people, maybe are learning not to do that.
That's such a strange thing to me. I would never. Okay, let me ask you this. Is it mostly women or men that will do that to you?
It's a pretty even mix, actually.
That's wild to me. I would, and look, there's lots of things that guys do that I would never do, but I would never go up to a woman, a stranger, definitely not, or even someone maybe I casually know, or even somebody I know really well, and pat their pregnant stomach. That just is, God, that's weird.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable. I feel like there are very few people that have like a pass for it. So like grandparents. So my parents, Danny's parents, I have no problem with them touching my pregnant belly. It's like their grandkid. It's cute. But these were people, like, you're right, people I didn't really know. Lots of old ladies. And then just like, I don't know, the men who do it are never, like, the ones who've done it to me are never like creepy about it. They're just like very forward and don't ask, and they just touch your belly. It's very weird.
I just feel like the practice of it is inherently creepy.
Yeah, it's got some vibes. There was somebody, I saw this amazing thread about a pregnant woman who went to Starbucks and got a coffee. And the guy behind the counter said, you really shouldn't be drinking caffeine when you're pregnant. And she said, I'm not pregnant. And just like humiliated him. She was pregnant. Like, it was.
Oh, yes. I would do that if I was a woman and was pregnant. I would do that every single time, even if it was extreme, like you were ready to burst out of the womb.
It's such a funny thing. I love it. And like, people don't know, like, the latest research says it's fine to drink, a cup of coffee a day. So like, it's not a big deal. And this person just took it upon themselves to police a pregnant person. I just love like how immediate karma that was.
The one thing I do admire about that person, though, is the confidence. I was someone that lacked confidence growing up, and I wish that I wouldn't do that. I'm not saying I'd do that, but I wish that I had it in me to go look at that person in the face and tell them, like, mansplain to them, you shouldn't be doing that if you're pregnant.
Right.
Like this barista at Starbucks.
Right.
Meanwhile, you just got finished at your OBGYN, and they're like, yeah, a little bit of caffeine's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. People
that
have
frappe.
People have a lot of opinions about you when you're pregnant. I had somebody the other day, literally. I have, as folks on our show know, I have a lot of health conditions, and I am not planning to breastfeed. guarantee someone says something about that in our comments or in the show notes or something like, or not in the show notes, in the comments on YouTube. Guaranteed. But like, it's not for me. I have
Callie
nerve
Pruitt,
disorders.
anti-breastfeeding.
Right. So I went to like this, they had a family center like event, and I went to it, and this woman, literally like knowing nothing about me, she came up to me, handed me a bag, like a pregnancy goodie bag, and was like, now I know, honey, that you're gonna breastfeed, right? And I was like, this is so uncomfortable. Like, why? What makes you think you can just come up to an absolute stranger and say, are you gonna breastfeed your baby?
That's, again, I cannot imagine ever doing that. What I would do in your situation, though, is look her straight in the face and say, oh, I don't have any nipples.
Had them surgically removed.
Yeah, they're just, I was an anomaly as a baby. They just weren't there, Oh, like, that's so weird.
It's nobody's business.
No!
If anybody out there has experienced judgment because they bottle fed their baby, solidarity with you. And if you breastfeed your baby, that's fucking amazing that you can provide sustenance to your child. That is just beautiful. So feed your babies. Just feed them.
As long as the baby's getting food, right. That's really what matters. Also, if I'm Danny in that situation, your husband, I would have looked at the woman and been like, okay, where's my goodie bag?
Unfortunately, he wasn't there. I think Danny would have had a few choice words.
Yeah, I would imagine that he would. Well, speaking of a few choice words, we got a heavy episode today. This very well could be the longest episode that we'll do. We don't know yet because we're just now recording it, but we have an interview with John Russell of the Holler, Ohio Valley, who has been on the ground in East Palestine reporting. I'd say he's a freelance journalist. He's got a huge following on TikTok. He's native to the area. He actually ran for Congress in Ohio at one point. I don't remember which year, but I think 2016. But he's been on the ground talking to people in East Palestine. He's been doing that since before the derailment happened. He's talked to people there about the rail strike and all of that stuff. So he's got a keen sense of what's happening on the ground. We were very excited to talk to him. It's a great interview that you all, I'm sure, will enjoy and will find super interesting. But today is kind of a different episode because we're talking all about this East Palestine, Norfolk Southern environmental disaster train derailment. It's a deep dive. We went deep. We tunneled subterranean.
Yeah, no, if we were children in school, we would have dug straight to China on this one.
Right. Yes, we would. And we would have made it. We wouldn't have burnt up in Earth's core. We would have made it through somehow. But we do have just a quick announcement at the beginning. I wanted to plug our Patreon, patreon.com/Appodlachia. If you join, you get a custom limerick from Callie Pruitt. Now, we had several people join this past week. We're going to punt the limericks until next week because we just got so much to cover. But we wanted to plug that's the way that we finance our show, and it has been a really important funding source for us. It helps us get these wonderful microphones, which mine's finally working again, and all the other tools we use to make this happen every week. So we really want to encourage you to join. If you can, you can join for as little as $1 a month. Callie, anything else to add?
We spent hours and hours of our time putting together in one place so that you didn't have to. If you value that kind of work, please join our Patreon. It's something that really supports us and the work that we do. This work is so important to our region and to us as individuals. And we hope to your communities as well. So support us on Patreon.
So we're going to talk about the background of this event, this derailment, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We're going to talk about all the details that happened with it. We're going to do a deep dive into the aftermath, the community environmental impacts, the government response, and in some cases, lack thereof. And we're going to talk about why it happened. And we also will have a little bit of listener testimony before we get into our interview. This is as comprehensive as I think we could possibly muster in the time period that we had to do this in. And I will premise this by saying that this information is current as of right now, as of February 20th, 2023 at 6:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, year of our Lord and Savior, Steve Irwin. things are bound to change. I think because this is an ongoing developing thing. This is an ongoing developing event, so things are going to change. But this is the information as we know it now.
So East Palestine, Ohio is in Columbiana County, right on the border of Ohio and Pennsylvania. And it's about 18 miles north of the northernmost panhandle of West Virginia. So it is right. Yes. If you are watching on YouTube, Chuck's middle finger is the panhandle. And he is showing you right now exactly where East Palestine is. So it's very close to West Virginia, very close to multiple states, and has a lot of impact on especially this interstate travel we're going to be talking about. Ohio is one of the major railway states, but just as general info, East Palestine is a town of about 4,800 people, and this derailment happened at about right now 16 days ago, I believe. February 4th was the date of the derailment.
I think it was February 3rd, actually, in the evening.
At night. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was February 3rd at night. A freight train operated by Norfolk Southern Railway Company carrying chemicals including vinyl chloride, butyl chloride, ethyl hexyl acrylate, and ethylene glycol monobutyl ether. It's a mouthful. Cannot believe I got through that. It derailed near East Palestine. The train had 150 cars in total. Remember that number because it's going to become important later. 9 of those cars were empty. 141 were loaded. And this train left Madison, Illinois, and it was en route to Pennsylvania. Conway, Pennsylvania, to be specific. So at 8:55 on February 3rd, the evening of February 3rd, 38 of the 150 cars derailed in East Palestine. 20 of those cars were carrying hazardous materials, and 11 of the cars that derailed were part of those 20. So to make it clear, 150 cars were in this train, 38 derailed, 11 of those 38 had hazardous materials. The National Transportation Safety Board is still conducting an investigation into the official cause of the derailment, but we did have early reports and early signs that it says and kind of suggests that a faulty wheel bearing on one car might be the cause.
Yeah, and I think the NTSB is going to be issuing some type of preliminary report in the next coming days. When they do, we'll put an update in the episode, whichever one comes after that. But let's talk a little bit about these chemicals, because those were a mouthful. I had quite literally never heard of any of them. Full disclosure, I was really fucking bad at chemistry. Just saying, I was not good at it. I didn't take chemistry after high school because I hated it. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I decided not to be a doctor, because you had to take chemistry in college. So take that for what it's worth. Just throwing it out there. Vinyl chloride is the one that we've seen the most about. It's 5 of the derailed cars are carrying vinyl chloride, and that's a man-made substance and the key ingredient in PVC. Callie, did you ever have a potato gun?
Yes.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Of course.
I also tried to lash together a trebuchet out of PVC once.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Lash. Okay, Boy Scout term.
It didn't work. It didn't work.
Were you a Venture Scout? Is that what you...
Oh, yes. Well, I was an honorary Cub Scout because I didn't want to be in Girl Scouts, and I loved Boy Scouts. And so I went all the way through with my brother, and we did Boy Scouts together and Order of the Arrow together, and then I was president of the Venture Crew. Yes.
Nice. Well, I did lash a lot of things. I never had a potato gun myself. Did have a friend in elementary school / junior high that did have one, and it blew up in his face, and then he got a piece of PVC stuck in his lip. Shout out to Jay Marker.
Oh my God.
I think it came out eventually, but anyway, that all to say is that there was probably some vinyl chloride in that. It's typically transported in the form of a compressed liquid, and it's known to cause cancer, and inhalation of it can cause respiratory symptoms such as shortness of breath, along with neurological symptoms like headaches and dizziness. Chronic exposure has been linked to liver damage and cancer, and it's important to point out there hasn't from my understanding, from what I've read, there hasn't been a ton of research on any of these chemicals' effect on the exposure to humans. Like, there's just not a lot to go by, but this is just what we know based on what research has been done by people that are smarter than me.
Yeah, and there hasn't been, I just want to throw it out there too, that there hasn't been a lot of research on these just generally existing in the environment either.
Yes.
Because nobody has really, thrown tons of it into a creek before.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe that hasn't happened already. I mean, I'm kind of being sarcastic, but not. So the other one that, because I don't want to go into detail about all these, I don't think it's super important, but there was one butyl acrylate. I don't know. Somebody can roast me about it later. One tank car lost an entire load of it, and it's a clear liquid used to make paint, adhesives, and caulk. Caulk, C-A-U-L-K, just for all of you out there. It's that foam stuff you put into holes. So the caulk you put into holes. Look, you gotta find some levity where you can. I'm
sorry.
That one got her. That one nailed it. I can't take full credit to that because there's this really funny thing that happened at a soccer practice in high school where this kid, his name was Adam Stair, and he was late to practice, and the coach was like, "Why were you late?" And Adam said, "I was helping my dad put caulk in holes." And it was because he was using caulking. So I do like to give credit where credit is due.
Oh, man. Thanks, Adam, for that one. That one really got me.
Anyway, caulking wasn't in this. It was just like the liquid that they use for it. Exposure to this has been known to cause headaches, dizziness, nausea, and irritation to the nose, throat, and lungs. So not a fun time to be breathing in these chemicals. This is kind of the wild part. And this is the one that created all the viral imagery from this, is that after this train derailed, a large fire erupted because these are highly flammable chemicals. And so it sent huge plumes of smoke into the air. It created this massive risk of an explosion that would have been triggered by the hazardous chemicals mixed with combustible materials. Not a fun time. So Ohio and Pennsylvania's governors at the time, Mike DeWine and Josh Shapiro, respectively, issued immediate evacuation orders at this time, and that affected roughly 2,000 residents living in a 1 to 2 mile radius or whatever of the area.
Which is not that far. Think about what is a mile from your house. Like, I just want to say, like, 1 to 2 mile radius is not big.
No, not big at all. And so basically what happened is that in order to prevent a massive explosion, there was some science behind this that I can't figure out with people in lab coats that figured this out. But the company, Norfolk Southern, carried out a controlled burn of the vinyl chloride 3 days after the derailment. It basically sent a small explosion into the air. It sent hydrogen chloride and phosphine into the air. Those are the two chemicals, I guess, that are created when you mix these substances together. I don't know. Somebody with a math degree or science degree can figure that one out for us. But the point being is that it had to be like a controlled burn in order to mitigate the danger from this.
Right.
Which is, and so this is wild, actually. This is something that I hope to dig in deeper to later on once we get a little bit more information about this in future episodes maybe. But Governor DeWine in Ohio said that the train was, quote, not considered a high hazardous material train based on like statutory or regulatory language because some of the cars on the train didn't contain such materials. So some of the cars did have those hazardous materials, but some of them didn't. And because some of them didn't, it was not by law technically considered a high hazardous material train. And therefore, the company was not required to notify the state that they were even transporting it through Ohio.
That is so bonkers.
That's one of those where we're going to get into lobbying later. I'm sure that a lobbyist helped to write that regulation.
Oh, yes.
I could not find it. I spent too much time looking. Federal regulations are a bitch to begin with, and the federal rail regulations are just a nightmare to try to sift through. I'm sure that somebody has, but basically Governor DeWine is calling for congressional reforms to this. I hope that actually happens because I feel like this is an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a little bit of the background. Now, let's talk a little bit about what happened to the community and the environment while this was happening and in the immediate aftermath. So generally, these chemicals, like Chuck said, they're unusual, and scientists don't really know what level of exposure to vinyl chloride and other compounds is safe, or how these chemicals interact with each other or the environment. Very helpful, I know. But we do know that even a little bit of this can be harmful to humans. A number of residents have reported headaches and respiratory problems and dizziness after the derailment, which are symptoms that are consistent with exposure to these chemicals.
And one thing, just real quick, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
oh, you're good.
The difficulty with that is that those are pretty general symptoms, and so it's really difficult for people to establish a causal link to that. Really easy for a company like Norfolk Southern to be like, well, there's no proof that the leaking of our chemicals caused this, so I don't know. Yeah. Shrug. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
No, I think that's great. And I'm about to answer your chemistry question about why they come out differently.
Let it rip.
When you burn something, it often changes its chemical makeup. Because that's a process of completely changing burning is a process that can change chemical makeup. So when you burn vinyl chloride, that is when the hydrogen chloride and phosgene, all those, when that's what kind of comes out when you burn vinyl chloride. So both of those are also very toxic they are super, super toxic chemicals. So this cloud that you've seen in all of these pictures that looks like a freaking mushroom cloud, that is full of very, very toxic chemicals. That's not like a wood burning fire.
And phosgene, just for anybody wondering, according to the CDC, is a colorless gas with a suffocating odor like musty hay. That's a hell of a description.
Yeah, that sounds really bad. So the big takeaway on the actual general, like what we have here, is that we don't know what the long-term effects will be, which is really scary, especially for people who were living there. I mean, that's like terrifying. So let's look at the air specifically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have all these government officials with these people being like, what's going to happen? And they're just like, I don't know. Shrug emoji. Guess we'll find out, right? Congrats on being a guinea pig.
Yeah, well, and this is about to make you feel even better if you live there. So in the early days, there were reports that many pets and that livestock were reported to have died from the exposure. So the chemicals in high concentrations, which is what folks were experiencing directly after. So this was when people had evacuated, but there were pets and there were animals left behind. It can burn lung tissue. A lot of these chemicals are incredibly dangerous, and so a lot of pets and animals died. So it doesn't feel good to have evacuated your home and to come back to a dead dog in your yard. And they say it's still safe. So the chemicals, though, will degrade in the environment.
There were some disputes about the animal deaths. I know that there were some reports that went back and forth on it. So there's a lot of anecdotal evidence from people saying that their animals have died. Now there is, and we will mention it later, but there has been a huge problem with fish dying, for sure.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, and I definitely agree. I was just reports of these. So the chemicals will degrade in the environment, so they're not forever chemicals, which. However, the challenge is that many sensors that are used to measure air quality are not very sensitive to these particular chemicals. So it's difficult to say whether or not the air is actually safe and when it will be safe.
That's probably one of the biggest things, because there has been a lot of talk about that and questions being asked about the air quality. And the problem is that nobody, at least at the time of reporting when I was reading, nobody could really say definitively one way or the other. I think that they cleared the air around there as being safe like a week or so after, but it's a lot. Jury's kind of out on that, I guess.
Yeah. Chuck, do you want to tell us about water? What's going on with the water and the fish?
Love water. Big fan. H2O, baby. Most of my body, water. Most of our body is water. So we kind of know a thing or two about it.
Yeah.
Not really. Well, at least I don't. Anyway, what I do know, I read in several news reports. Water. So this is kind of where I think we know a little bit more about what's going on. I think there's been more research, more studies on how these chemicals have interacted with water. So health authorities far more equipped to sample harmful chemicals in wells and stream compared to air and test them. People drinking from municipal water are in the clear, according to Ohio's Environmental Protection Agency. But residents who drink private well water, which I don't have the data in front of me, I would imagine it's a decent percentage. But people who drink private well water, they're being advised to drink from bottled water until they can have their wells actually tested. So that's
Comforting.
yeah, right. Yeah. So, good luck with that, guys. If you can find bottled water and you can get it and can afford it. Some communities up to 100 miles away in places like Fort Gay, Kentucky, and Huntington, West Virginia have experienced a gasoline-like smell in their water, but authorities haven't established a link to that yet. They haven't been able to establish a causal link. However, that is extremely troubling, and I believe, I don't know where Fort Gay is, but Huntington is right along, I think it's right along the Ohio Kanawha River.
It is. Yeah.
So that would be downstream of where this took place. Places like Cincinnati, however, are closing their water intake routes, which is wild. Cincinnati is right along the river, and so they're closing off their intake in order to not risk contamination, and that's a pretty big sign. I mean, Cincinnati is a huge city. Debatable even on a good day with the Ohio River. I grew up near it. I would, to each their own. You're taking a risk every time with that shit. I mean, look, I drank from the tap quite a bit growing up. I wasn't happy about it, but I did.
Yeah.
So there's also, I don't even know really what this, I guess there's a plume of butyl acrylate floating down the Ohio River.
Yeah.
That's wild. Very, inspires a lot of confidence. Testing has suggested it's not hazardous to humans anymore since it's been diluted, but unclear what the impact on wildlife will be, which that's a whole other can of worms that we don't have a lot of answers about.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. But this is the other thing. So and I mentioned this earlier, shortly after the wreck, wildlife officials reported the death of roughly 3,500 fish. That's a lot.
That's a lot of fish.
Now, I don't know exactly what that was from. I'm assuming it was from one of the chemicals that leaked into the Ohio River. I don't know which one, but that's extremely troubling. That's a huge ecological impact on just the river in general. Oh, Lord. But the things to remember for this, unless you get your water straight from the Ohio River, you are upstream. The Ohio River is the bottom of the watershed, so all streams flow toward it. Concerns do still exist. That's important to remember. Some experts are concerned that authorities may not be testing the full range of compounds that could harm humans. And this is, I think, oftentimes what happens in the aftermath of this. There's a lot of rush to mitigate this problem, to remediate the environmental impact. And we don't always know what all could be happening, what all could be, people be exposed to. And this is a direct quote. It's unclear what chemicals they're testing for in comparison to what chemicals were generated and released. That was from Andrew Welton, an environmental engineer at Purdue University. It's not just the chemicals that leak from the train that are potentially hazardous, but also compounds produced by combustion, like Callie mentioned earlier. And he was very concerned about this. I am too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing about this that is so upsetting is the sheer weight of the unknowns. Like, when there's an oil spill, we kind of know what cleanup might look like. We might know a little bit about how much it would cost, about how long you need to be away from your homes. This is something that is new, and it's terrifying to even think about what the unknowns are, because you have this burning blowing in one direction, impacting the air, hundreds of miles in one direction, and then you have it flowing in a different direction, and there are millions of people who are going to be impacted by this eventually, and we have no idea what to tell them.
Yeah, it's pretty troubling. It's and this is the thing. It's like that's the unknowns are probably the most dangerous thing at this point. I don't want to say that indefinitely, but it's definitely like probably one of the biggest problems right now. And I think that's got to be frustrating for the people that live there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Long-term impact. So that's, I think, another thing where the jury's out on it a bit right now. What I've read is that it depends on how fast the cleanup is. And I don't have a good sense of how fast that's going right now. And I don't
think anybody does. Yeah. There's not anything out there on it, which is troubling.
And I just don't feel comfortable opining on that because I don't want to pretend like I know more than I do. My guess is that just from the sounds of it, it's not as fast as what it could have been. But currently, contaminated areas are being dug out, and creeks are being dammed, and pollutants are being removed from the water. The exact level of exposure is unclear, as are the impacts of the individual chemicals on human health. Scientists also don't know what happens when people are exposed to a combination of chemicals like vinyl chloride and butyl acrylate, like we mentioned earlier. So that's, troubling. Great. Wonderful. But one of the most troubling things about this is that Norfolk Southern, who we will be talking about a lot more, don't worry, folks, we have not ignored them. One of the most troubling things is that Norfolk Southern has been put in charge of their own cleanup.
Oh, boy.
This is, it's not good. It's worrisome because there will not be a third party supervising them.
That is so bad.
Yeah. When in our history have large corporations disappointed us, said they were going to do something and then didn't, lied about doing something? Well, I could think about 10,000, probably.
Yeah. It's very upsetting.
I'd like to get testimony from my bloodstream, which currently has PFAS chemicals flowing in it from drinking Lubeck Public Service District water that was contaminated by DuPont Washington Works and their Teflon plant.
Oh,
sorry, my blood's not available for comment.
I would like to comment.
Go ahead.
Just R.I.P. When you go, that's what I'm blaming it on, Chuck. I'm gonna say when he's dead, it's the Teflon.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, that's morbid, but I mean, yeah. Well, so what this means is that local journalists, members of the community, and other non-official actors will be forced to continue to hold this company to account because apparently at this point the government is not going to be supervising this. So that's and that's something that's going to be really important. We talk about this later with John. Is that accountability is going to have to come from multiple angles. But before we get into all of that, we still have more details to cover the impact on the community. Callie, do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So an event of this size and magnitude cannot happen without having major impacts on the people who live around there. And there are a few things that we just wanted to hit on to keep in mind as we move forward, just to make sure that we're centering human beings in this and the people who are there. Children in this town have experienced a traumatic event. I heard that there are kids from John, actually, you'll hear it in the interview. There are kids who are running around playing in a town that is filled with workers in hazmat suits. And that does something to your brain.
Yeah.
To grow up in a place where somebody else is protected and you're not, what does that say about the value of your life? And the value of your family's lives. So long term, there's a traumatic event that has occurred. In addition to that, if we're just looking at the cold hard cash, property values, which in this town are some of the only equity that people will ever have is in their homes. Property values are going to plummet from this, which makes it even harder to liquidate your equity or to leave if families want to leave. There are probably a lot of families who are thinking about it right now, but how can you, if you don't have the resources to root your entire life and buy a house that, if in another area, then you're stuck there and you are dealing with these property values that are plummeting because of the malpractice of a corporation. Which is just heartbreaking, because these people, a lot of it, like I said, this is their only form of wealth in this world. It's just devastating. And the third piece of this is that there were businesses that were destroyed as well. One example is a garbage truck business owned by a couple that had been in operation for 18 years. They said, quote, "It totally wrecked our life. I'm at the point now where I want out of here. We're going to relocate. We can't do it no more." So that impact by itself is there are ripple out effects of that. Now many people throughout the town of East Palestine aren't getting their trash picked up. I mean, there are so many community impacts that come from these things, these three things happening, and in tandem with each other. So we just want to center the human beings who live there and just really make sure that we're talking about the human cost of this.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because when we get into this, it's easy to get bogged down in the details, about the chemicals and all the health impacts of that can come of it. But just like the witnessing of a traumatic event, it messes you up. And this is really devastating. It's really devastating for this community, because it could very, very possibly change this community forever. I think it probably already has. And so it's really important that we keep that in mind and keep these people and their families in mind.
Yeah.
Regardless of how they fucking voted in an election.
Thank you.
I won't even get into that. The social media
We're not even going to talk about
bullshit.
that. Fuck that.
Instead, let's talk about the government response. Fuck that. I mean,
much more cheerful.
Yeah, that's right. So this is something that I tried to get some information through social media on this past week, because there was a lot of controversy surrounding a disaster declaration. And for context, disaster declarations are really a formality so that state and or federal money can be released to help with a current emergency. That's like the practical effect of it. And so Fox News and other right-wing outlets had published stories saying that the Biden administration declined to declare a state of emergency / disaster declaration. And I wanted to look into that because it was only right-wing outlets that were reporting it at the time. And I'm not trying to give the Biden administration a pass. I just wanted to see if this was legit or if this was misconstruing what was happening. Turns out it was a little bit of both. Mostly misconstruing.
Shocker.
All right, so I'm going to walk y'all through this. This is to the best of my ability. This is what I found out. And if I'm wrong, please somebody tell me and I will issue a correction. So the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, a serial politician from Ohio and a Republican who I was honestly surprised he was still alive when he was running for governor in 2018. I thought that he had gone. I think I mistook him for George Voinovich, but that's neither here nor there. The governor of Ohio first must request a disaster declaration for East Palestine and the affected region. That is a necessary step to unlock certain federal aid and supplement the separate request for doctors and other medical assistance that the federal government will provide. So DeWine then said that FEMA claimed the area did not qualify for a disaster declaration, in part because the railroad company was paying for some residential expenses and because of the lack of damage to personal property after the derailment. So my understanding with that is that because the railroad company was paying for some of the expenses, that I guess meant that the federal government could not be involved, or at least that's his relaying of events. And I think that FEMA had signaled something like that. When the White House originally put out a statement about the facts of their response to this, they very clearly outlined what NTSB was doing, what the Federal Highway Administration was doing and the Department of Transportation, everything like that. And basically what they said for FEMA was that FEMA is in constant contact with officials in Ohio. They did not spell out anything they were doing, which led me to believe that this was partially true. Well, there's some, I guess, culpability to go around, because then Governor DeWine, at a press conference on Tuesday, February 14th, so a week before this comes out, he had said, and it is a direct quote, "Look, the president called me and said anything you need. I have not called him back after that conversation. We will not hesitate to do that if we're seeing a problem or anything, but I'm not seeing it." So he declined to give the White House a call back, which seemed to suggest that he was not pushing very hard for a declaration. However, 2 days later, that Thursday, Governor DeWine made the formal request for federal assistance. So I just wanted to walk through that because there was a lot of controversy around it, and there was a lot of playing the blame game. To be honest with you, I'm not really sure who's to blame in this. It sounds like there's some issues on both the White House and the DeWine administration, but then there's also some procedural hurdles. I don't honestly know, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. So there.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis of it, that there are problems on both ends. To me, it makes a lot of sense that you can't call in FEMA without a state declaring an emergency. That's just like how our government is set up. Like the federal government can't come in and just do whatever they want in states.
Federalism.
Right. So that seems like a states' rights issue.
That's right, Callie. States' rights. States' rights.
An actual states' rights issue.
Yeah, not like the Civil War, which Corey Ryan Forster always likes to say, "Oh, which state right were you trying to fight for?"
Exactly. So this actually does seem like a states' rights issue. So that makes sense. But at the same time, I think that FEMA, I heard some people differentiating this between like a hurricane being a quote unquote act of God, and this being like an accident. And I think that there's some sort of delineation there with FEMA that if my hunch is that this particular instance will change FEMA regulations. It's just that right now they can't do anything. And that's shitty and it doesn't make any sense. But I think that coming from this, we'll see change.
Right. And act of God, there is technical...
That's like an actual legal term.
Yeah, no, there is technical legal terminology that relates to that. It's not just like a turn of... Well, I mean, it is a turn of phrase, but there is some legality to back that up. And so there is... Yeah, and I think you're right. You're right to point that out because there is some corporate culpability here, and I think that muddies the waters with how the government can respond. I'm not sure, and again, I don't want to act like I'm not wanting to blame the Biden administration or the DeWine administration. I'm not familiar with all the nuances of it, and I'm waiting for more information to come out.
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me, it sounds like both of them fucked up a little bit.
I think I'm comfortable saying that because that's the safe route.
Yeah.
Government on all levels fucked it up. Well, let's talk about the White House response. What was your take on this? First, tell us a little bit about the White House's response and then give your take because I'm interested to hear what you think.
So the mayor of East Palestine told a community gathering this week that it took nearly 2 weeks for anyone from the White House to contact him.
That's ridiculous.
That makes me so angry. It's just so angry. EPA Administrator Michael Reagan was the first top Biden administration official on the scene, and that was February 16th. So this is true. This is true that it took them a long time. While visits don't have tangible fixes involved, they do mean something to residents. And by a visit, we mean President Biden should go and survey the damage like he does in hurricanes, like he does in floods like he does in wildfires out west. Like, this is a normal practice of an American president. My complaint is that President Biden found time to go to fucking Ukraine.
Fucking Ukraine.
Yes, I'm in support. I just want to say I'm in support of like us supporting Ukraine, but he found time to go there before he went to East Palestine. Ohio's like 10 minutes from Washington.
He was closer to Palestine than he was to East Palestine.
I'm just saying, y'all, Biden should have been in East Palestine last week. It should have happened. And like, again, I am supportive of the Ukrainian people's plight, and I want to give them weapons, but damn, Biden. Anyway, speaking of presidents, former President Trump is going to beat him to the scene, which makes me just absolutely lose my mind. Trump is going to be visiting East Palestine on Wednesday. That is 2 days from now. And Biden has still not scheduled a trip. I just want to like say that again. He's still not scheduled a trip. Here's my guess, is that this is tricky territory for the White House and the Biden administration because of the politics involved in the rail strike that was set to happen late last year, but that was kind of like shadily put down with aid from the White House. So with Biden being like so openly pro-union, and yet being the kind of president that put down a strike because of safety conditions and things of that nature, this seems like it might be difficult territory for him. But I am definitely still pissed that Trump is going to go and visit the scene before Biden. That makes me just like lose my mind.
I hate when politics start to make, like when you start to make decisions based on politics. And I really think that that's what's happening here. Look.
Oh, totally.
I think it's pretty safe to say that if President Biden makes a trip down there, there's going to be some pissed off people, and rightly so. And there's going to be some interactions that are going to be caught on video, and it's going to make him look bad. But you know what?
Yeah.
That comes with the territory of being president of the United States. You don't get to avoid the hard parts just because you don't want that like negative soundbite or that bad clip that you know every Republican running for president is going to run in an ad.
Yeah. You have
to be there and
up.
show up. Yeah. It's worse, in my opinion, it's worse not to, because if you go there, you're at least there.
Yes. I agree. I mean, there are things that you sign up for when you run for president. And, you know, the thing that comes to my mind, and this is a totally different scenario, but it's the same kind of like really hard choice. Like President Obama, when the Newtown shooting at Sandy Hook happened, he went and met with parents that had just lost their 6 and 7-year-old kids in a shooting. And he was the father of little girls at the time. And he knew he was going to be very emotional. He was going to cry. There was going to be angry parents there. And he still went. And you have to have the kind of courage that it takes when you like, you know, that's not an easy thing. And that was not that. President Obama still talks about that to this day as the most difficult day of his presidency.
Mm-hmm.
This is not Newtown. This is not that hard. And Biden needs to show up.
Agree completely. This is in my, and I know I'm biased because like this is Appalachia. And it's Ohio, and it's very close to where I grew up. I think it's only about 2.5 hours from where I grew up. Going and visiting a place like this means so much more than, like, to the American people, means so much more than going to Ukraine, in my opinion. Like, going to Ukraine was important. Don't get me wrong. He could have done that last week. But this is like being there is so important because it shows people in a part of the country that you did not win. Right. You lost pretty heavily, that you're still going to show up for them. Because look, in his one of his speeches, I don't remember which one, probably all of them, when he was in the run up to being president, then the night he got elected, in his inauguration speech, he has constantly said, I'm going to be the president for everybody, for Red America, for Blue America. Well, now's your chance to do it, bud.
Yeah.
And I mean, he hasn't shown up there Pete Buttigieg hasn't even shown up there.
Oh,
My
don't
God,
even get me
like,
started on Pete.
Mayor Pete, man. I know he's Secretary Pete, but right now I'm going to address him as Mayor Pete. He needs to be there. Like, it's his baby. I mean, he's been ushering this infrastructure bill in. He should be there answering questions as to why nothing's been done yet. I mean, I guess
he should have taken charge day one. He should have. I mean, it would have cleared Biden if he had actually gone.
Absolutely.
And said, I am planting myself in this community until this problem is solved. Like, if you send a cabinet member that is as well known as Pete, like, that would have I would have had no problems, but I have major problems with how Pete Buttigieg has handled this situation or not handled this situation. That has been a humongous flub of the administration. Yeah.
So I would just like to say that if you look at his public schedule, the most recent public engagements for him are from the week of January 23rd through February 4th. Now, I don't know if that's like a normal practice, but it's awful damn suspicious that it stops a day after that derailment. And it says last updated Friday, February 17th. So, and I know that he was speaking at a like National Association of County Officials or something conference, I think on the 15th. There's nothing on his schedule that he could not have canceled to come and make an appearance here.
Nothing.
And people want to see him there.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He makes time to go on Fox News all the time.
All the time.
Go see the fucking people, man. Like, this is what pisses me off. Like, thankfully, EPA Administrator Michael Regan came. Granted, it was 2 weeks after this happened, but at least he was there.
And honestly, it shouldn't be on him.
No,
I just want to say that. I want to give him props because this is not on him. It is on the president, it is on the transportation secretary, and the EPA. They are constantly the punching bag of the entire country.
Yeah.
And lots of politicians. And the fact that he did come out and was like, this matters to me, like major props to him, because the EPA should be there, but it shouldn't be their job to be the first on the scene. That's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we should probably move on to Norfolk Southern's response to this.
Oof.
And so we'll talk about that. We'll give a little bit of a little bit on J.D. Vance, and then we'll dive into why this all happened, and that's where the real meat and potatoes is. But Norfolk Southern, we just want to say here at the outset that they have made and deleted multiple offers and press statements that conflict with each other. So initially, and these are all like we have social media posts that took off on these. And credit to Callie for being on top of this in the beginning. Norfolk Southern issued a press release saying that they would set up a family assistance center, but didn't provide any details about it, while mentioning they would give $25,000 to support the Red Cross and their temporary community shelters. After public backlash, they scrubbed that press release. Like, literally, if you go on, it has no reference to the $25,000 anymore. And I looked because you can go in the Wayback Machine and the Internet Archive and look and see where it did before. They issued a new press release several days later announcing that their Family Assistance Fund distributed over $1 million to families and businesses impacted by the train derailment. Still not enough. And somebody pointed out in the comments that this charitable fund could possibly avoid being taxed by the IRS, which I think is a really interesting and awful goddamn convenient thing for them to just be able to do this. But that's the country we live in and the shitty tax code. They issued a remediation plan to the EPA on February 10th. To be honest with you, I didn't dive too deep into it. They helped to plan a local town hall, though, which our friend John, which we'll get to that interview later, attended. But they bailed on it because they were too worried about the safety of their employees. Didn't seem to care much about the safety of the people that actually lived there.
Yeah.
Crazy thought.
Yeah, that is just like so textbook corporate America.
Hell yeah.
That they're like, they advertised it, they put out all kinds of media about it, and they backed out. It was like 3 or 4 hours before.
Oh yeah, no, people
were already like lined up, just cowardly.
Who was running their PR shop? Because, like, who looked at them and said, this will be a good idea? Let's back out of it. I mean, look, I know you don't want the sound bites of you being there, but show the fuck up. Their CEO came, like, a couple days ago, but it was conveniently after a town hall, so they didn't have to be questioned in front of a bunch of people. Right. Do the fucking hard job. That guy gets paid tens of millions of dollars, I bet, a year. If you get paid that much money, you have to do the hard parts too, instead of just, going and sucking the dick of all your shareholders.
He gets paid $4 million a year, but he's worth hundreds of millions.
Sure that he gets a lot of stock bonuses and stuff that make his compensation package even higher than 4.
Yep.
Anyway, speaking of sucking up to people that they don't actually care about, let's talk really quickly about J.D. Vance.
Who has played a shockingly small role in all of this.
Shockingly ineffective and stupid one at that. Very shocking. First of all, it pains me every time I see Senator next to his name, and I will never get over that. It's just really sad. But unfortunately, he did win that race. We are not election deniers here on this show. We're not Stop the Steelers.
We're just bitter.
Yeah, exactly. We're just bitter, and that's okay. You're allowed to be. We got to talk about old JD just a little bit. He attempted to be a Republican senator, but wasn't very good at it. Or maybe, depending on how you look at it, he was really good at being a Republican senator. I don't know. So he had this video where he visited a contaminated stream. You could tell it was contaminated because it had that glossy rainbowish glow, like if you spilled gasoline or something into water. Mm-hmm. Which in most instances, this would be good. It's good to show people what the actual environment looks like. But it's JD, so first of all, it's clouded in bullshit. Second of all, he looked like it was very performative the way that it came off, because he was like, "Well, Biden's got to do something about this," and he did it in his church clothes. Basically, it looked like he had a brand new crisp Brooks Brothers shirt on.
And also, so in this video, he says somebody needs to do something about this. And I'm like, you're the goddamn fucking senator.
It's the banana costume meme all over again. He does this every fucking time. We're trying to figure out who's got the authority to do anything here. Right. You're a United States senator.
Yeah, it's just unbelievably perfect that he would say something like that. We can't allow these people to be forgotten. You're the person that needs to not forget them.
Yeah, don't worry. He'll write a book about how brave he was in East Palestine, and he'll call it Hillbilly Trilogy or something. So he also criticized Pete Buttigieg.
Hillbilly Tragedy.
Yeah, Hillbilly Tragedy. That's right. Oh, good job. That'll really, really get the people fired up. Yeah. He tried to criticize Pete Buttigieg when Buttigieg correctly pointed out that the Trump administration loosened train safety rules, which we will be talking about very shortly. And he said, "Stop blaming Trump." What a
My
guy.
Daddy's gonna beat up your daddy.
That's
the energy.
I like to imagine that was the tone too.
Right.
Like, my dad's gonna beat up your dad. Just you wait.
Yeah.
And really, Trump is his daddy because he's the only reason that he won the Republican primary. So there's a lot of truth to that.
J.D. Mandel.
J.D. Mandel, what a classy guy. Let's get into the real interesting parts here. Why this happened.
So,
this is all you. This is your baby right here.
I'm so excited about. Okay, so I want to talk about Norfolk Southern's impact on the government. So I did a little digging, and in 2021, which are the numbers that we have the most recent accurate picture of, Norfolk Southern reported expenses on its quarter federal lobbying reports using the Lobbying Disclosure Act method. If the tax method was used, Norfolk Southern's corporate political contribution and lobbying expense for 2021 would total to $4,360,000. So that is an enormous sum of money. Enormous. That is such that kind of money can buy you so much power. And it has. So they employ 36 federal registered lobbyists. They have also have contracts with 27 what are called revolvers. So a revolver is a kind of common practice of government regulators, congressional staff, and even members of Congress who take new jobs with lobbying firms and private sector organizations that they used to oversee. So this means that they are employing people who worked in the transportation sector in administrations, or worked for Congress, or worked for different committees that oversee transportation. And that is a lot of insider baseball that they have access to. I'm going to just let you react to all of that.
Well, some of you will recall when we did our series on opioids, Purdue Pharma and Cardinal Health and AmerisourceBergen and all these peddlers of pills would do this with, like, the DEA, for example. And this is common in many industries where you'll have a pretty high-ranking official in a regulatory agency that regulates that company. So in this instance, it would be the Federal or the Department of Transportation, or the Railroad Administration, right? People who know the ins and outs of the government, they have the relationships there, and they'll say, hey, you're getting this government salary. It maxes out at like $180,000 a year. What if the good people at Norfolk Southern offered you $400,000 a year to come work for us? That is a hard offer to turn down, and I hate it.
It is.
Now, there was an attempt to, like, put some regulations on this. I think during the Obama administration, they had a revolving door lobbyist moratorium of, like, it was like 2 years or something. I think it was for members of Congress, though.
Yeah, it was a little bit weak. There were a lot of Democratic candidates when there was a primary, like for the presidency when Joe Biden was running. There was a lot of talk about this. And Elizabeth Warren had kind of the most stringent reforms that she wanted to put in place. I think hers was 8 years. And it did not just have to, it was any lobbying. And it was people who worked in administrations.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about reform on this side, but right now it's kind of just like the jungle out there.
And this is a huge problem. It pisses me the fuck off because this is like legalized government corruption in a way. It's not, the corruption is not the right word. It's bribery. It's legalized bribery because you're saying, listen, I'm going to give you this amount of money. You're going to leave the government, but you're going to leverage all of your contacts, all of your knowledge for our benefit. So they're essentially buying a chunk of the government in a way. And this is crony shit. I hate it. I hate it so much. But I mean, this is how Washington especially works. But this is really how most levels of government work. And in some instances, it can be a good thing. But for corporate stuff like this, it's just bad. Yeah. It's nasty. Yeah.
And it gets really complicated because there are industries where it makes sense to move in and out of government roles. Like if you are a scientist and you work at a national lab. So like the nuances here are really difficult to regulate. So anyway, lobbying, I just want to say this. Lobbying is such a bad word. It's like a word that has a very heavy connotation to it. But lobbying on its own is not a bad thing. There are amazing lobbyists who do incredible
including
work.
Callie Pruitt.
And I was a lobbyist, and I was very proud of my work. But it's all about what and who you lobby for. Mm-hmm. So most of the disclosed attempts to influence Ohio leaders. So we're starting on this, like there are federal lobbying, state lobbying. Sometimes they overlap. But to influence Ohio leaders came on generic rail or transportation issues. Some efforts, though, were devoted to defeating legislation that would have established tougher safety standards for rail yards and train operators. And this really requires an entirely different podcast to like suss through all of those bills. I mean, it's like thousands of pages because they bury this shit. It's like it's how these big bills get passed, is that you bury things in them. So I did more digging though, and Norfolk Southern in 2022 They had to report to the Senate what bills they were lobbying on, and they were lobbying on 9, which is actually kind of a small number for such a big corporation. And so they were lobbying on 9 federal bills, including appropriations bills, which that is basically who decides. They have the pot of money. It's already been given to them, and they decide where that's going. And they're joint resolutions, which are often just statements. So you'll hear about a joint resolution to honor this person or that person. So those are usually they don't have like actionable things for the government to do. They lobbied on the Freight Act and other larger omnibus bills. So really the only like very specific one was the Freight Act. And I looked that one up, and it's an acronym. So FREIGHT actually stands for Facilitating Relief for Efficient Intermodal Gateways to Handle Transportation Act. So that was at the federal level. For Ohio political donations, in all, the railway company has contributed about $98,000 during the past 6 years to Ohio statewide and legislative candidates, according to data from the Secretary of State of Ohio. That is what is on the record. We talk about this with John later, and when we interview him, that is stuff where you have a max out donation. This is not an independent expenditure, which we've talked about on the show before too. So independent expenditures are like if you run an advertisement, or if you contribute to a super PAC that does not coordinate with a campaign. That stuff doesn't have to be disclosed. This is just disclosed information. Virtually all of that $98,000 went to Republicans. Although Norfolk Southern hedged its support for DeWine in 2018 with a $3,000 check to Richard Cordray, who was the Democratic candidate. I think this is just a very interesting note. Norfolk Southern describes its criteria for campaign donations on its website, saying, quote, "We make political contributions when we determine them to be in the best interests of the corporation. All political spending reflects the railroad's interests and not those of individual officers or directors." So they say the quiet part out loud, folks. They are not looking out for their workers. They're not looking out for the community. They're not looking out for the betterment of the country. They are looking out for what is best for the corporation. And that is just the truth of it.
Well, I mean, they're really showing their hand. I mean, and it's pretty obvious when you look at their business practices.
Yeah. So also in here, just a note about stock buybacks. Instead of using money to enhance the safety of trains or hire more employees, Norfolk Southern paid their shareholders $4.7 billion with a B dollars in stock buybacks and dividends. So this company is not short of cash, y'all. They just are short of compassion.
And I believe that was in 2022. Let's talk a little bit about the train itself. So we're getting into the why here. We talked a little bit about Norfolk Southern. We will be talking about them more soon. But the train itself. Okay, so we said that one of the potential causes, the likely cause, was a faulty brake or bearing that melted or something like that. So this train they were using had actually broken down before. The actual train that derailed had experienced issues prior to the derailment and actually broke down at least once before this happened. And they were quoted as using, quote, Civil War era brakes. Now, I don't know how literal that is, but I mean, they were clearly very dated.
Civil War era values.
That's
Civil
it.
War era brakes.
States' rights. There you go. This is also interesting. See, I don't know much about the rail industry whatsoever or trains, but employees that were interviewed said that there were concerns among those working on the train about the train's excessive weight and length. So it was 151 cars long, which was 9,300 feet, and roughly 18,000 tons. 18,000 tons and 36 million pounds. That's a lot. Certainly more than I weigh. Employees said that 150 cars is too long and that the weight of the train contributed to the severity of the derailment. And this is backed up by the former Federal Railroad Administration administrator, Sarah Feinberg, who said the train was super long and that she had expressed concern in the past at trains that were 80 to 90 cars long. And this train was 50% longer than that.
Yeah, this is basic physics, people. Objects in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. So these trains, the cars that were so heavy are pushing forward, acted upon by friction on the rails, but they're pushing forward at such speed that that's what caused the derailment. Likely is the weight of the cars behind that is pushing up and bowing the actual train itself.
And if you can imagine all of that just colliding, it's a wonder that no more cars derailed than what did, honestly. This is just like, as you'll find out, this is all because of money. The more cars that you can put on a train, the more money you're going to make, essentially because you're being more efficient. You don't have to run as many trains. And the more that you can put on these cars. That's why it was so heavy. And then, here's another thing. The less employees that you have to use and the more hours you can make them work, the more money in shareholder pockets, because employee fatigue is a huge, huge thing. Now, John gets into a little bit about the rail strike that happened earlier this year. I think it was late last year. And it had to do with issues just like this. The workers were exhausted. So this is a quote from one employee. The workers are exhausted. Times for car inspections have been drastically cut, and there are no regulations on the sides of the trains. And employees at Norfolk Southern don't even get paid sick time, which is ridiculous.
That's just like a whole other issue. That's just crazy.
Oh, yeah. I had no idea how poorly these employees were treated, but this is just insane. And then
it's disgusting.
The industry at large is in a huge problem. I keep saying, I keep referencing our interview, and it's really good. And John knows a lot more about this stuff than Callie or I do, but there is an industry-wide practice that was implemented several years ago to cut costs and increase profits, which is partially to blame for this. It's called the precision schedule railroading. It's been widely adopted the past few years to increase efficiency, reduce costs. This led to longer trains and an overall staff decrease of about 28% among the biggest railroad companies. So they could cut staff, make them work longer hours, get more cars on the train. And
28% is a huge cut. That is massive.
That's almost a third of your workforce. That's crazy.
It's unreal.
And it's led to fewer and shorter inspections of these train cars. I think the inspections on average were cut in half. So maybe if the inspections were longer, they could have caught one of the problems with this car that ended up causing the derailment. We don't know, but this is just really, really disappointing. And it's just...
Yeah, the pieces of this puzzle are coming together. The many, many failures that caused this, like, this is what we're getting to, is that this is not an isolated act of God accident. This is dereliction of basic principles of running a company and of running a state and of running a country. I mean... It really is it speaks to the failure on so many fronts.
Again, it's all about money. It's all about corporate greed. And it's all about Norfolk Southern's corporate greed. Look, the railroad industry has been facing pressure for years because of the trucking industry and the air freight industry in order to maximize their profits and get more business. So the faster they can run those trains, the more products that they can ship on those trains, that they can beat out other overroad trucks, other semi trucks, and airplanes that carry air freight. Then the better off they are, and the more profitable they are. But that's at the expense of the people that are actually the workers, and that's really the big story with this, in my opinion. It's the corporate greed that's getting in the way. And yes, there are government issues. In fact, one of the ones that we want to bring up, just sort of to kind of tie this all together, was a withdrawal from brake rules that the Trump administration did in 2017. The Department of Transportation under Donald Trump withdrew from electronically controlled pneumatic brakes, a pneumatic brake rule that basically required the use of these brakes, these specialized brakes. on trains that were carrying flammable liquids. They argued that the safety benefits were inconclusive and the cost-benefit analysis was negative. So basically, they rescinded this regulation so that it would save rail companies money so that they didn't have to use these specialized brakes on these hazardous material train cars. Now, we can't say one way or the other yet if that was a leading cause of this derailment, because we don't have the full report from the NTSB.
This is all, it really is, it's so upsetting. And it's not, this goes to show it's also not under one party.
No.
There's fault to be shared
Absolutely.
between Democrats and Republicans. And this comes down to, you're right, corporate greed, also political expediency. What can I do to make it a little bit easier for this corporation? What can I do to make it a little bit, give them a tax break here, give them a regulation break there? That happens all the time. So it's about money, power, and political expediency. This is just, it's so sad.
It's sad. And that's a perfect way to put it, because that stew of greed and bullshit is the perfect list of ingredients for a disaster like this. It's not the people in East Palestine's fault, certainly. It's not, the train operator's fault, the conductor's fault, or the people working on the tracks. It's the fault of the people that are in the cushy offices at Norfolk Southern headquarters that are taking private jets everywhere, that have probably not even set foot on one of those trains, or let alone driven one, at least not for long. And it's also the fault of the people that are in the high-ranking offices in government that are allowing this to happen. Those are the people to blame.
Thus, we have landed at the end of our deep dive.
There is one listener testimony, though, that I did want to mention before we get into our interview.
Let's do it.
And this is submitted to us on Twitter. This person chose to remain anonymous, but they gave us permission to share this information. This is a person who lives in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. They said it's about 8 miles southeast of East Palestine. So they're pregnant, and they're concerned with what they might be exposed to. They said, yeah, absolutely. They said the major immediate danger, in their opinion, was handled in an okay way by evacuating people in the vicinity close to the derailment. And they were disheartened by the clickbait misinformation swirling online. People have claimed that animals hundreds of miles away have died, or that all their pets in the area are dead. And it's just totally not helpful, is what they said, which that's fair. Those are, and this stuff has been swirling around ever since this happened. They said what needs to happen is thorough, regular testing, not clickbait, not people telling them to all leave or they'll die of cancer. Leave your home, there's no reason to stay there, you're going to die. Yeah, it's not helpful. And stronger regulations and unions to prevent this from happening again, which I completely agree.
Yeah.
A stronger union could have prevented this.
That is factual.
And I want to say, not necessarily a stronger union, but more support for union efforts, especially for the rail strike, is what I should say.
Right.
And that's on a lot of people. That's on a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans.
It sure is. Yeah.
We tried to cover this as best as we could. We're not journalists. We were just seekers of the truth, and we tried to...
That sounded like we have an eagle in our logo or something. We're Alex Jones, truth seekers.
I'm just looking for answers. Right. I'm just asking questions. That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing. Fuck Alex Jones. No, I mean we're just trying to we're just trying to curate information and help people understand what's really happened, what's actually happened, and who might be to blame. And honestly, not looking great for Norfolk Southern, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, if we're looking at who's the main person to blame, I would definitely point the finger straight at them. Absolutely.
Well, let's get in our interview. It's a great one. We've got John Russell on. He is a independent journalist. He is a TikTok star. I'll call him that. I don't think he'd call himself that, but I will. And he also publishes the very great Substack, Holler, Ohio Valley. He's a great guy. He is from that area. I can't remember what the name of the town is that he said he's from. I'm totally blanking on it. But he is from the East Palestine area. He's very familiar with it. He right now lives about an hour away from there. He's been on the ground pretty much since day one and even before. He covered the rail strike pretty extensively. He's talked to people on the ground ever since this derailment happened, and he's got a lot of perspective from that to share. We thought it was important to hear from somebody who's been on the ground and actually talking to people. So I thought it was really great to have him, and I really appreciate his perspective a lot.
Yeah, his journalism is fabulous, and it was really good to, he confirmed a lot of what we wanted to talk about today, and making sure that we're taking on the right angles and that we're taking on the right issues. So it was really great to have him on.
Absolutely. So let's get into it, and we'll hear from John. All right, that was our interview. I've got links in the show notes. Check out his Substack and all of his social media accounts. Make sure you're following him because he's going to be covering this until there's nothing left to cover, I imagine. And he does a great job of doing that. He's worked with More Perfect Union, collaborated with them on this. So we've got really good sources on the ground in him, and check him out. Make sure you support his work. Callie, any parting thoughts before we hop off? This was a doozy of an episode.
It really was. We love doing this for y'all. Let us know if you have any questions, because we want to find the answers for you. And let us know if you want to hear from anybody else on this issue. If you've seen someone that we need to speak to, let us know. And thank you all for being so supportive of this. We have seen unbelievable sharing of information and spreading of community support for East Palestine amongst our followers, and that's been really heartening for me, that our followers that you all take this stuff seriously and you take community seriously, and it means a lot to me to see that it's not just us that are out there doing this fighting. It's literally thousands of you who are fighting right alongside us to make Appalachia a better place and to see real results for these folks. So I appreciate this community so much.
Absolutely. Echo all that. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you all so much for supporting us and for listening. We won't be covering this as extensively in the future, but any type of relevant and important information that comes out about this, we're going to try to be on it as best as we can, and we're not going to forget about it. Just like we don't forget about you guys. We thank you, we appreciate you, and we'll talk to you all next week.